Today, we will be speaking with our three panelists about careers in science outreach and education. I have with me Laura Martin, who is a consultant working with the Arizona Science Center, as well as other educational institutions. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
I have Shaheen Khurana, who is a program director with the nonprofit Reset. Welcome, Shaheen.
Thank you.
Chris Williams, who is a STEM education specialist with the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Okay. So my first question, what first piqued your interest in science education, and why do you think trainees should be interested in this type of career? Chris?
I guess I'll start. So
Okay.
I got my first experience in science education and outreach when I was a graduate student at Georgetown University.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during that time I was at a school in Southeast Washington, D.C., and I was working with some students, and I realized that I may be the only African-American scientist that they ever have a chance to meet. And so that kind of got me excited about just going out into the schools and interacting with the students and meeting with their parents. So that's how it all started. And then when I was a postdoctoral fellow at the NIH, I was continuing on with these scientific outreach and engagement sessions. I would do science fairs, STEM festivals, and just participate in any way like that. And it was actually during the Science Career Symposium at NIH that they had during my first years when I met Julie Edwards from the Carnegie Academy of Science Education. And while I was in, I asked her, could I come and volunteer just to get an idea about how STEM education programs are run. So I was there for a year and a half, maybe a year and a half. And I learned a lot, met a lot of great people, and I just grew my network that way. And after that, I started a nonprofit STEM education program called the First Life Science Program. And I've worked with that organization for like 3 or 4 years. And I stopped only because my wife and I had twin boys and they require all of our attention. But so I did all that while I was at the National Institutes of Health. And after that, I ended up going to do a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship at the National Science Foundation. And then the way I ended up at the museum is that while I was there, a colleague of mine who was at Georgetown University when I was there reached out to me and asked me if I was interested in having my information sent over to the National Museum of African American History and Culture because of an opportunity that they had. And I said, sure, no problem. They sent my information over, and I went in for an interview. I didn't know it was an actual interview, but I still dressed up and put on my suit and went in for an interview. And I was offered a position as the STEM education specialist at the museum. And I've been loving it. It's a dream job for me. So I'm thankful for all of the entire path and journey that I've been on so far.
Wow, that's great. Okay, Laura, would you?
Well, I started out in graduate school. First of all, before I got a master's in education, and I taught for a few years, and I was very, very interested in how children's thinking went. They were saying all these weird things and curious, and at the same time very uninformed or misinformed. And in fact, I developed that into a fun sort of icebreaker for teachers, where we write down these beliefs that we had about science when we were younger, like, I eat a watermelon seed and it grows in my stomach, or I had somebody tell me if you got rain right in your eye, you would go blind. So I was walking around that for years. So all these curious things that kids thought about. So when I went to graduate school for my PhD in it's cognitive development, really, but cross-cultural and developmental psych. The people we read were Piaget and Vygotsky, who both were very sort of focused on physics as a topic. And so I got into that. I did my dissertation on children's joint problem solving of physics problems. And from there, I went to work at one of these R&D groups at Bank Street College of Education called the Center for Children and Technology. And there we started doing scientific research, but not the kind where it's an open hypothesis and we're going to see what falls out. These were projects that we wanted to come out in a particular way. And so we were evaluating the strength of these educational projects in STEM education. And so I went on from there, looking at medium, different media, and how that supports learning in science and math primarily, and then later engineering and technology. And so that's how I got into it, and have been working. I worked at the Children's Television Workshop for a while. We ran the 3-to-1 Contact show, which was a science show, and Square One TV, a math show, and among other things in Sesame Street, of course. And then went into the museum field where we looked at how exhibits can support people's learning of science concepts and math concepts. So that's how I got into it, and love the topics because it still amazes me how people think, and giving people the benefit of the doubt. They really do want to learn a lot about how the world works. So we're happy to help them do that.
Shaheen?
So my path to STEM education and outreach, I guess, is a little different from everybody else's. So I started off my career in the private industry, working in the telecommunications sector, Sprint, Nextel, Nortel, wireless systems design. And then I moved to the government, working for in emergency preparedness and disaster recovery. So I've made a transition from the private sector to the government sector. And then in 2016, I was ready to for new challenges. And I knew I wanted to work with more social justice issues. And that was my long-term goal. So I started volunteering with Reset. So I was trying to figure out what would be a good fit for my skill set, with my technology background and bringing in some of the private sector and the government sector experience. So I started volunteering with Reset. And since my background is also computer science, I started building computer science curriculum to teach. So I started looking at resources and then building the curriculum together. And I started teaching it to schools in DC with Reset. And Reset, by the way, stands for Raising Excitement for Science, Engineering, and Technology. So right off the bat, that sort of seemed like a good fit for me to volunteer my time. And then I built the curriculum and I started working with the two schools, and then realized what a big gap it was. In our schools, both from teachers not being equipped to teach it, and then looking at all the students, the untapped potential of the students. So I think my motivation has been I've had a rich career in tech, and it's been impactful. My work has been great, and I wanted to be able to let the students know about that. It's sort of afforded me a great lifestyle. And I think over and above that, the part that really interests me is the economic empowerment that goes along with that STEM education. And, basically those high growth, high wage jobs. And I know, I came from a low income family, but I had my mother was a very strong education advocate, and so she made a lot of sacrifices to make sure that we had those. Those career pathways, that educational background to be able to do to get into technology. So right off the bat, I knew I wanted to sort of be able to create those career pathways for students, especially women, girls, minorities, and then low income students. And so that's sort of my interest in STEM education.
Okay. So, Chris, when I think of science within the Smithsonian museums, I think about the Natural History Museum, or I think about the Air and Space Museum. I was surprised to learn that there's a STEM education specialist at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Could you talk about your role at that museum?
Okay, so your response is exactly what everyone else says. Whenever they come into one of my programs, they say, "I didn't know there would be STEM at this museum." But when you think about it, and you think about what history is, I mean, history really entails everything. And a lot of times, people think about African American history. They'll think about music. They'll think about civil rights. They'll think about religion, religious leaders, and things like that. But STEM science, African Americans have been making contributions to the STEM enterprise for as long as this nation has been in existence. And so what I do at the museum is actually pretty simple. I tell the stories of African Americans and the contributions they've made to American culture and society through STEM. And so I do that for teachers, I do that for students, and I do that for the public. So for teachers, we have we have several different programs that they can participate in. The first one is the STEM Master Teacher Fellowship. And this is a program that's designed for K-12 STEM educators who have at least 5 years of teaching experience. And what they do is they submit their application, and then whoever the selected fellows are, they come in and work with the museum educators for a 2-month period over their summer break. And what they're doing is helping us to create new STEM content that we can share with other teachers as well as with the public. And on top of that, they help us to develop STEM workshops, professional development workshops that range from either a day long to multi-day workshops. And then for the public and for students, we have a lot of fun programs. One of the smaller programs is known as a pop-up program. It's the type of program, if you walk into a museum and you just happen to look left or happen to look right, you see something that catches your eye, you want to go over and check it out. It's not always necessarily on the calendar, but once you get there, the head of education likes to call it a surprise and delight program. And so it's a STEM program, hands-on. I want people to come in and be engaged. And the really cool part is that I'm designing these programs not knowing who's going to come through the door. So sometimes you'll have seniors, sometimes you'll have class groups, 40, 50 children with 2 or 3 adults, and other times you just have random people coming in 1 or 2 at a time. And then one of the larger programs that I do are called STEM Days. Now, these programs are museum-wide programs that often are focused around a central theme. So we've had 2 STEM Days so far. We had one in 2019, and it was done in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission when man first walked on the moon. And this was all about African Americans at NASA and the different roles that we played over the course of NASA's existence, ranging from administrators to scientists to engineers and even astronauts. And we had astronaut Alvin Drew come in and speak to our audience, which was actually really exciting. Everyone loved them and wanted to get pictures. And then just earlier this year in February, at the end of National Engineering Week, we had our STEM Day focused on African American engineers. And we had 2 speakers. We had Dr. April Erickson from NASA, and then we had the inventor of the Super Soaker, Dr. Lonnie Johnson, come in and speak to our audience. And I mean, these programs are tons of fun. They're just like the smaller pop-up programs, but instead of it just being a museum content, what we end up actually doing is inviting in outside organizations that have similar focal points to what the program is going to be about. And we have them come in and they help to create a STEM atmosphere where people can come in and have giveaways, just learn about the different careers and either in engineering or different careers at NASA, and just really learn history and STEM all in one place. And I think it's always a lot of fun, really amazing.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, Shaheen, so Reset works with both schools and other nonprofit groups such as the Girl Scouts to provide inquiry-based STEM programs. Could you discuss what you do as a program director?
So my role as a program director is to go out and recruit more STEM professionals to teach in our classrooms. So what we do is we work with different organizations like NIH, like U.S. Patent and Trade Organization. We the tech companies around in the area like Booz Allen, General Dynamics. So we recruit volunteers from all of these organizations, so Reset stands, like I said, it stands for Raising Excitement for Science, Engineering, and Technology, and the goal there is to get students really excited about science. There's really lots of research which talks about how if you engage students early and consistently, and they're more likely to choose STEM electives in high school, and then go on to college, and then in careers in STEM. So we concentrate. So Reset concentrates on the K through 8. K through middle school, elementary and middle school programs. So what we do is we recruit STEM professionals to do hands-on programs in schools. And we particularly prioritize Title I schools and working with underserved communities. And so we work with, of course, the Girl Scouts, and we work with Northern Virginia Family Service, Wesley Housing, which provides low-income housing. So Martha's Table. And so these programs are intended to both create that excitement for science, and as well as provide STEM role models, right? So when we bring in professionals from the field to teach in our classrooms, they sort of make those connections between life and learning. So it kind of, aligns some of the, like for technology, that's going to, in the technology sector, is going to align, the things that we teach in school more with what the needs of the technology are. And so we both do outreach to to recruit more volunteers. We also are working constantly to expand our STEM programs in our schools and community service organizations. We're working closely with our volunteers to provide them curriculum, so they can be more effective in their teaching. As some of them come in and they've got some teaching experience, and others don't. So we give them sort of the tools that they need to sort of go in and be successful in a classroom. With a volunteer program like that, you have the teachers are always in the class, so the volunteers have the luxury of being inspirational and not having to worry about the discipline aspect of it. And so that's primarily what I do as the program director for Reset, building out our programs, building out our partnerships in schools, and community services organizations, particularly with the Girl Scouts, what we're doing targeting closing the gender gap in technology. There's 1.8 million Girl Scouts. So if you want to close the gender gap in technology, there's no better way to do it. And so our programs are, we have a program called think like a programmer, where we teach them both coding as well as computational thinking. It's sort of like the mindsets of a computer science, and it's all of it is through and games and activities. We teach them about technological innovations using drones. So they're like, programming drones. We have them open up a hard drive to look inside. So it's all really hands on. And the goal is to introduce them to computer science early. So that when they get to high school, they're more likely to take it. I think people are under the impression is, students are going to get to high school and then they're automatically going to take STEM electives, and that's just not really the case. I mean, you have to introduce it in
early on to get them to get interested. Sure.
So we're really working on expanding our computer science program because that is basically, where all the future jobs are. Tech jobs growing faster than any other sector, right? 500,000 jobs by 2026. And they're the high wage, high growth kind of jobs. So.
All right, that's great. Thank you. And then, Laura, you worked as the Director for Science Interpretation at Arizona Science Center before moving to consulting. What do you do in your role as a consultant in STEM education and outreach, and how is that different from working directly at the museum?
Well, the role of the consultant varies depending on the project and depending on the institution. I'd say in all cases, what you're doing is you're working at a level with the administration and with the people making the decisions. So you're not, again, with the kids or with the teachers as much as you are when you're working directly in a museum. Now, in a museum, when you get promoted to higher and higher jobs, that you might lose a little bit of touch with all the campers and all the teachers that come in. I always tried to attend as many trainings as I could, and make sure I saw what was going on when I was in charge of the education departments. But as a consultant, you're dealing more with the administration, the people, as I said, making decisions about the programming and about how it's going to unfold. And then there you have different roles. So you might be a consultant on an NSF project that allows you to put in your 2 cents, and they can take it or leave it. But those are fun programs to be part of because you get to brainstorm with usually other consultants and advisors, and really help the projects open up and try new things. So that's really good. And then the projects tell you how they're doing, and you can comment on those kinds of aspects of the program as well. Then there are the kinds where they hire you to solve a problem for them. And that might be where you roll up your sleeves and you talk with people and you map out, based on your expertise, what kinds of approaches would be good. You recommend readings, you recommend strategies for overcoming certain problems or addressing certain issues that the museum would like to address, or the institution. So there are those kinds of consulting as well. I'm just finishing up a project with our local botanical garden, which is developed a 5-year strategic plan, and they're trying to design an evaluation for their strategic plan to see whether it worked to reach particularly new audiences that they're trying to speak to. So I've been helping them, the staff, gather their thoughts, gather their programs, ideas, put it into a logic model framework, and help them along. They're not quite there yet, but we're working on it. And when the garden reopens in the fall, which we hope they will, we'll pick it up again. So that's the kind of thing I do as a consultant. As I said, it's lots of fun to come in and brainstorm and give people ideas and get them organized. It's very satisfying to help do that. One of the issues that I'll just continue for a second. One of the issues that we do come in contact with a lot is the fact that people in the museum fields in the STEM areas may not have the background in how people learn these topics. So we try to introduce those kinds of things and reflective practices among the staff, bring them information about learning and help them to develop sensitivity to the visitors and to the people who attend their classes, things like that. And I have a couple of books I was going to show these. This is one for everybody to know about. It's called How People Learn, from the National Academies Press, the National Research Council. That's a really good resource. It's not very new, but it's pretty universal. The ideas haven't changed that much since then. And the other book that I worked on is called Learning Science in Informal Environments. And it's also the National Research Council publication. So those are both available online, but they're big books. So I would recommend buying them instead of downloading hundreds of pages.
Hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
And then kind of building on that idea. So how do you move from writing highly technical papers to writing lessons or activities for elementary school students?
So for both, whether you're writing highly technical papers or you're doing creating an activity for students or for teachers, you still have to do your research. I mean, you still need to know what your goal is, and you need to have the background information in order to reach the goal. But I'm just think about it. But so for the technical papers, you need data, you need proof. Whereas when you're working with teachers or students, you want to make sure that the learning goals are very clear. For me, what I'm doing, I want to make sure that whoever's participating in any of the activities that I'm doing, that they're actually having fun. Yeah. And so with that, you want them to learn, you want them to have fun. So that means you have to start the activity or the lesson in the appropriate place so that some people aren't left behind because you're starting in a more advanced position than where they are. But you don't want it to be so simple that the people who have advanced knowledge are bored with where you're starting. So it's just finding the sweet spot and providing additional opportunities for where people can learn and get some learning on the side while they're in the space. So for when I create museums and create activities in the museum, I'll create them for students that are at least 8 years old. But in the group I'm focusing on primarily is somewhere between 8 and 17 years on average. But children 8 years old don't come to the museum by themselves. They come with younger siblings. So I try to start it in a place. So if a child is incredibly young, like I need to get the parent excited because the child is probably going to be a little more excited and a little more interested. So I'm just trying to find a way to make it provide opportunities for intergenerational learning and just use images and cool hands-on activities that allow the students to get excited, but also allow the adults to get excited and not feel like they're being childish. I want them to get in touch with their childlike curiosity, but not to feel a little nervous or uneasy about it.
Shaheen?
Well, so I definitely found it very challenging moving from, the research papers to building content for students. And I had no teaching experience. So when I started building this computer science curriculum, I think it was, I constantly underestimated how much time it would take, to try to build and the content is not a problem. It's how to make it engaging and exciting to students. From what I found is basically, young students, they're very eager to learn. They're always excited about learning, and they're very non-judgmental. So whatever your teaching style, they're like flowing with it, right?
Mhm.
But they are very transparent. So if they're bored, you can tell it. So,
Mhm.
there's no filter, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
the, what I dread is that little glaze going over,
Oh.
like the glaze of boredom. So that was my challenge, trying to make sure that the curriculum that we develop is really engaging. And from a computer science perspective, there's obviously the coding aspect of it,
Mhm.
and for some reason they love the coding aspect of it. So we use Scratch, which is a block-based programming language. So it's developed by MIT for school-age children. So really, we have no problem with engagement there. It's like drag and drop, and they're seeing the results almost immediately. It's the concepts, of algorithms, how the internet works, all
Mhm.
of that. How do you make that engaging, right? And so we designed. And using resources, there's a few nonprofits out there, Code.org, obviously Scratch, CS Unplugged. They're sort of developing content for young students, to get them really interested in computer science. So I was able to use a lot of the resource, but with young kids that I found that you have to try it, right? To try it and see how it works out. And some lessons seem to go really, really well, and then some lessons, for some reason, will sort of fall short. So developing that curriculum and having it ready for volunteers when they come in sort of lowers the barriers for us bringing in new volunteers. So we'll give them sort of like a plan of potential, so of lessons that they can pick off from, and they know that they've been tried, and the students really enjoy it. Also, props really work well. So for our STEM lessons, we give our students like little lab coats. Um,
Mhm.
and so they feel like they're scientists, and all of that, and then everything has to be really hands on. We
Mhm.
also do a lot of field trips, so
Mhm.
to provide that experiential learning aspect of it. For example, one of our most popular field trips is a science cruise on the Anacostia River. It's also provided by another nonprofit called Living Classrooms, and we'll get letters from the students after they've been on that field trip. And for some of them, this is their first experience of a field trip. Because we work with a lot of Title I schools, and they'll draw pictures of the boat and how they were able to steer it. So, and all the fish that they were able to see, and so that kind of is where I think all the lesson building needs to be. From where they can touch, feel,
Yeah.
experiential. So.
All right. Thank you. And then, Laura, you mentioned the 2 books that trainees could check out. Do you have other suggestions?
Well, I published a new book on reflective practice in museums that just came out, last year, from Routledge Press. That's a good one. But I was going to say that in regard to making the transition from academic, because those publications are quite academic, there is a version of the learning science in informal environments that's meant for practitioners that kind of
Hmm.
boils down the research which most people are not comfortable reading, like your boards and things
Okay.
like that. But I was going to say 2 things. One is you really need to be bilingual in a sense. You need
Mm.
to know that you can't just write for, uh, grown-ups in the lay audience the same way that you do for your peers in the academic circles, and certainly not for children. And also everything from exhibit labels, which are really hard to do well. They're not simple, and it's not simple to translate science into material. As Chris said, is it the eighth? We went with the 8th grade level. It might be the 8th year level. What kind of language you use, so you get to know that. But the other part of that is testing what you're writing. I'm a great believer in prototype testing.
Mm-hmm.
You do a beta version, test it with your audience before you print it up or etch it in metal on the side of your exam, because people might misunderstand it, or they might not get it, or you might find that it's not clear. And we've had many examples in my career of those kinds of things. But as long as you do run it by your audience beforehand, and there are many ways to do that,
Mm-hmm.
that'll save you a lot of grief in the end. But this idea that we even produced as part of my NIH grant, a handbook for scientists who come to the museum either to give a lecture or to work with kids in the public on how to speak to the public. Now, the scientists, interestingly, the scientists on our advisory committee did not think this was an important thing. Why would a scientist need to know how to speak about their work? They know how to speak about their work. But what they don't know is people don't read graphs the same way that they do. People don't understand these complicated, relationships and diagrams. People don't take jokes easily, and the scientists make jokes, and the kids are very literal. So you have to be very careful about the kinds of language you use. So we did the handbook anyway, and there's a larger NSF project that's also doing the same thing, is training scientists to speak to the public in a way that's not condescending, but is comprehensible. So there are definitely there's science to writing for the public, and we encourage everyone to think about it that way, because it's not so simple as it looks.
Definitely. And I guess starting again with Chris, could you tell us about the best aspects of your current position, and then maybe the most challenging aspects of your position?
Okay, so I'll start with the challenges. Well, for me, one of the biggest ones is it's just learning about all the different history of African Americans in STEM, because most, at least in my experience, most of many of the contributions that African Americans have made are not known like widely. And so that was the first challenge. The second challenge was knowing, now that I have all this additional information, which people or which groups do I focus on? And so that turns into being a plus, because it gives me a lot of intellectual freedom, and gives me not wiggle room, just gives me many directions that I could possibly go. And I guess I would say the third most challenging part of being at the museum is just learning the new organization, how it works, and not just doing the work up front that the public sees, but doing all the work in the back end, such as planning, ordering, bringing in the correct speakers, making sure all of the logistical aspects are taken care of on the back end. But with the most wonderful parts of my job are that honestly, I work with phenomenal people. I work in the education department, and everyone on the education team is great and incredibly supportive. But within the education department, I work on the teaching and learning team. And as I mentioned, we do 3rd grade through 12th grade. And although I'm the only STEM person on the team, they are always giving me ideas, trying to find new ways for us to work together so that we can make the most robust products that we possibly can. Another really good thing about working at the museum, as I said, is the intellectual freedom, because many of the people who've made contributions aren't necessarily known. This means I can pull people out into the public side that they've never heard about, while also making connections with people who they do know, as well as people who are currently doing the type of work that I'm highlighting from the past as well. And then here's another thing that I didn't get when I was doing research. So with research, you can work for years on a project, months on a project, you'll write it up, you'll publish it. You may have a strong impact on 2 to 3 labs around the world, maybe, just depending on what your topic is, but very few people have an impact, an immediate impact that they can see and feel and that they know is lasting. Whereas when I'm working with students or working with the public, I get to see the moment that the light bulb goes on, and I can see when the connections are made. And that's really what I enjoy probably more than anything is that one-on-one connection, seeing someone leave with new ideas or new capabilities that they didn't have when they first started and came into the program.
Great. And then Shaheen, could you answer the same question?
Yeah, so I'll echo what Chris said. As far as the best part of some of these programs that we do is seeing the very direct impact that you have on students. It's like the so-called light bulb moments. In this, with Reset, I've had plenty of what they call the mission moments, right? Where you've had students that you started off coding, in second grade, they're now in fourth grade, and they're like taking off and doing like these games, building their own games. And so it's just though that very direct impact that you can see, when they actually get it, and what we're trying to teach, especially with computer science, is not just like the actual content; it's also the mindsets. How to persist through a problem, debugging your code and that kind of thing. And so when they finally are able to get it, it's just amazing to watch. And then the other thing I'm particularly proud of is the Girl Scout program that we have, right? I mean, where we have our volunteers training the Teen Scouts in all of the coding and all of the activities for the program, and then the Teen Scouts are actually turning around and teaching the juniors and brownies. The Think Like a Programmer badge program. And it's just amazing because you're getting twice the bang for your buck, right? Both sets of students, both sets of scouts are learning all of the content, and then the Teen Scouts are getting more of that leadership and the mentoring and the presentation sort of skills, and then having some of the Teen Scouts tell you that because of the program they're actually choosing their major to be computer science. Or I also work with a couple of different organizations. Those are like 11th and 12th graders, right? And a lot of them are actually, going on to take computer science as in college, and I've been writing recommendations, for them in college, and that's been like really rewarding to see that. From a challenge perspective, I think I just speak to the larger challenge of enhancing the diversity and inclusion in the STEM, especially in technology sector. It's basically a complex set of issues, right? And how to get to, there's so much untapped potential in the students. How to sort of like look at training more of the teachers to be able to teach computer science so they can create these career pathways for their students, and then also matching the needs of the tech sector with what is being taught in schools. So I think those are the larger challenges in our industry.
Okay, thank you. And then Laura, the same question, please.
Well, I agree that the idea of turning kids on to science and technology is a great feeling. I think the satisfaction also comes from seeing the staff develop as well, and develop their skills and their knowledge about how people learn, and implementing that. The projects are so exciting, and it's a very creative place to be for a person with a science background who comes into a field of informal learning that is outside of school, which is what primarily I focus on, although we certainly do a lot of work with teachers and schools. But the creativity that you get to enjoy, and having fun with topics, and sort of bringing the excitement of technology, media, things like that to the public is so much fun and part of the job. It's great. We had, for instance, that NIH grant I mentioned. We were focusing on bringing concepts from the NIH roadmap to the public, and several of the concepts in their roadmap are just too complicated on molecular biology that it doesn't make sense to even try. So we picked some topics that were relevant for the public, and then we went off and had a lot of fun with our advisors and with the kids, and getting feedback on all these things. So that's a good thing. I think the challenge is, from working in a museum primarily, they administrations are always a challenge because they might not provide for enough staff development time and enough sort of breathing space for the staff to do as good a job as they can, because they're out delivering programs, of all kinds, day and night, including birthday parties and things like that. So getting the administration to buy into the significance and the importance of the STEM programs is a big one. So I'd say that and getting the staff to reflect on their practices is a challenge, mainly because they don't have time. So.
Cool. So my next question is, now that schools are shut down and museums are closed because of the coronavirus, is this impacting your institution's mission, and how are you responding? And then do you anticipate that these changes will continue long term? How do you think your field will look 5 years from now, Chris?
So it is definitely impacting the way that we get work done, but it has not changed the mission. We're still reaching out to the students, to the teachers, and trying to create content, virtual content that they can access and use. And within the Smithsonian, there have been a number of institution-wide initiatives put together to create content that they can share with the local school districts, such as in DC, Virginia, and Maryland. And so I've been trying to create content that I can include within those initiatives, and I try to send it out to people that are on that listserv, but also within my own network, because I have a ton of connections who are in STEM and in science education, and they can share it with people who they know are interested in the topic or are looking for information on the topic. And I do imagine this is going to be something that we're going to have to deal with for several years in the future, because if coronavirus is anything like the flu or the common cold, it's going to be seasonal. And if it is seasonal, you're going to have to deal with this every late summer, early fall, all the way through the spring. And so until we have a vaccine, or until we have a treatment that makes it significantly less deadly, this is going to be something we're going to have to get used to. And I think people are going to start to adapt. Organizations are going to start to adapt and learn to create virtual content or in-person content that can be quickly switched to become digital and virtual.
Okay, thank you. Shaheen?
Yeah, so for us too, it's the impact is rather large, because most of our programs are with schools and community service organizations, and so when schools shut down, that was a huge impact. But we're very busy now trying to convert all our programs to virtual programs. So with the Girl Scouts, we're doing virtual coding and computer science programs, and other STEM programs. And in our schools, distance learning. There's just been a variety of different products that they've been using, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and so they've just started actual their distance learning programs in the Virginia and the DMV area, and they've had significant challenges with it. And so we're starting to work with the schools, trying to put some of the programs that we had in place, continue them online. The other thing that we're working with is providing tech tool training to the teachers. Because the teachers, I think, were just not prepared to deal with all of these, these tools, and providing. So, for example, we're helping them with training, on how to do voiceovers for PowerPoints, right? How to do their lessons, convert that. Google Classroom tools and how to use those. So we're doing tech training for the teachers. We're also doing a lot of STEM at home sort of activities, like creating videos and providing resources to parents and of course the educators on things that they can use around the house to do STEM experiments, because and they have to be simple because we're already asking the parents to do a lot of teaching at home. And so those are the kind of resources that we're trying to put together. But I anticipate that, since this has been a good exercise in using all of the distance learning tools. And I know from, the school perspective, they're not able to guarantee they're not to ensure equity. So they're not sort of requiring it. So they're pretty much going to be working very hard on making sure that they have the distance learning tools, at least in the future, for a situation like this that comes up again. And so, I think most of our programs, virtual programs, are sort of here to stay, and why not, right? I mean, they definitely extend all of our learning opportunities.
Okay.
So I think I anticipate in the future we'll do like a combination of the two, like in person as well as virtual. So.
Okay, great. And then Laura?
Well, we have a small, considered a mid-sized science center that does a lot of programming in the community and after school, and also Girl Scouts and everything. But for the time being, what we're offering is some daily internet activities for parents and kids at home, and demonstrations. We're videoing the demonstrations that we do on the floor of the science center, which are fun little lessons in different topics. I don't know, I can't speak for the Science Center, but my guess is that they will also continue to develop the online presence, of which we don't have a very strong one. Some other large museums do have quite extensive programs online for kids and teachers. We don't have that as much, but my guess is that they will be developing some more of that once they know what the reopening is going to look like, and how schools are going to be able to handle field trips, and how they're going to let the public come in. I believe that there's not a substitute for hands-on, so I'm hoping that the real face-to-face experience won't disappear at all, even though the online experience is very exciting as well.
Okay. And then my final question is, what kinds of steps would you recommend to our trainees who are interested in a career in science education and outreach? Chris?
Okay. I think what what I would say is just really pay attention to what you're interested in and what you're good in as soon as you hear these words. So for me, when I was in graduate school, that was my first introduction to science education. I had no idea this would end up turning into a career for me, but I continued to follow through with it because it was something I really cared about, and I did find out I was good at it as well. So that makes a difference. But if there's something you're passionate about, stick with it. Continue to follow through with it, even if you have another job or another career happening at the same time, because you never know. Like for me, you never know when you're going to get the call that there's an opportunity for you. And then another thing is, whatever your interests are, make sure you let other people know in your network and anybody you come in contact with, let them know what you're interested in, what you've been doing, what you've done, so that if an opportunity comes up that may be good for you, they'll be able to help you.
And then Shaheen?
So I would say try to volunteer or find internships in organizations that work with STEM outreach. I find volunteering is a great way to get a real good feel for the mission of the organization, as well as sort of like, get an idea of where the gaps are and where you can sort of like your skills will be of value. Definitely, if you have a passion for teaching, there's opportunities within STEM education outreach to be able to do that, and especially if you're interested in youth development or child development. So look for those opportunities. There are opportunities, for advocacy in this area, right? If you want to create that long-term change. So there are organizations like Girls Who Code, Black Girls Code, who work on sort of like a mix of both programs as well as advocacy. So there's several areas that you can work with. There's volunteer coordination. There's kind of programs that I work with, teaching, advocacy. So interning or volunteering with an organization, I think, is the best way to be able to do that.
And then do you have any organizations you would suggest, either you or Chris or Laura?
So there's a lot of nonprofits that are working or developing content. So those I think would be great to work with. Code.org, CS Unplugged, Scratch. So that's from a content curriculum building perspective. If you're interested in working with underserved communities and girls, if you're passionate about education equity, then I would say Girls Who Code, Black Girls Code. They're expanding computer science education, they have great programs for building those 21st century skills, computing skills. So that, and they have both experience with actually teaching and program building, advocacy. And there's a lot of policy organizations also that work with STEM education. Urban Alliance is another one that are that's a local organization. So I would say working with local organizations is a great way to see to directly impact your community. So I would start there.
There's a couple of things that people can do. There are a number of very good R&D firms around the country that have projects in Washington area or other places, and to look them up and see whether there are positions open or internship opportunities, that would be good. Volunteering is very good because you make yourself indispensable very quickly, and they'll offer you a job if you can. But the other thing that I was going to say is that there are, if you're in a university, go to the Department of Education, because they might have, many of these big universities have NSF grants. Some have NIH grants. Those are fewer and far between. They have grants from NASA. They have grants from NOAA. They might be hiring people to work on these programs, these projects out in the community. because they do a lot of educational work in the STEM fields. So I would go, out of the biology department or the physics department and go to the Department of Education and see what possibilities there are there for them. Also to go online and to look at what NSF is funding and what NIH is funding. There might be something in your area. There's sometimes turnover on the staff of these projects. So there might be an opportunity to contribute to those as well. Yeah, so that's what it is. There's some very exciting research and development projects going on in the country, and you should become aware of those. One of the big firms is called TERC, T-E-R-C, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, has a number of interesting projects going on. Another one is Educational Development Corporation or Center in Newton, Massachusetts, and New York City, and they do a lot of very interesting educational work. But there are more. And all the museums, many museums, have funded grants to do special projects. So that's another thing. If you go to the ASTEC, the Association of Science Technology Centers website, they have some job postings, but you also will find out through their publications which museums have large grants to do public outreach, and you can get in touch with them and see if there are any openings at those places as well. I don't know what's happening over the COVID summer, but
Yeah.
I think
all the opportunities have dried up.
the grants should be continuing, so that's good.
Okay. All right. And that was the end of my questions. So I'd like to thank everybody for participating in this panel.